We've been talking today about really the personal character of a leader. And let me zero in, which I think is so prevalent today, is that asking the question, am I an ethical leader? Am I ethical? If anything, we've got to guard ourselves in this here nature and time of ministry, that there's ethics to what we do. First and foremost, it's accountability. Who are you accountable to? Who are you accountable to? We all are called to be accountable to someone. Number two, it's about responsibility. Take this ministry with responsibility. You are responsible to God for this ministry. And thirdly, do this ministry with integrity. Integrity. We live in a world where integrity is in short supply. It cannot be said about us in ministry. Integrity is the use of power. How do you use power? Do you lord over people? Or do you use the power that you have in a compassionate way? Is it ego motivated? Is it ego centered? Power is about honesty. Honesty with yourself, and honesty with God, and honesty with others. This is all about this issue of integrity. It involves the application of justice. It involves fairness. It involves privilege that we all have and how we use it. It involves what I do with information. Just the whole mere fact of information is about power. So I raised some questions for you. I'll let you answer the questions about this ethical nature of ministry and leadership in it. And let me throw some questions out for you without trying necessarily to answer them for you, but I would call you to answer them. Questions such as, have I been totally honest in my dealings with people today? Reflect on that question. Number two, have I acted appropriately with folk of the opposite sex? You talk about the killing of ministry today. It's a question of, have I indulged in unsavory thoughts in my mind? No one else knows they're there, but you've asked yourself those kinds of questions. In other words, have I had uncharitable feelings towards someone else? Next one. Have I been above reproach in my dealing with financial matters? Finances will kill a ministry just as fast as anything, if not faster. Another question you might ask. Have I fulfilled my obligations in ministry without compromising? Have I approached it with a willing spirit? Or have I done it out of drudgery? Oh God, I got to do this. Question. Have I taken time to evaluate what my true motives are in what I do in ministry? What my true motives are. Another one, this day and age, have I spent sufficient time with family and friends? They make up who we are. They speak into our life. We're not robots. We are give and take. And folk who are friends and family should not feel cheated by how much time and what we spend and how we deal with them. Another one might be, have I taken care of my family's spiritual needs? The olden days in the church, they used to say, oh, well, ministry comes before my family. I've never heard such a crazy thing in all my life. If God has given you a family, you first and foremost, you must answer for God for that family. We have too many people practicing ministry today where their family has suffered, fallen apart, or non-existent because we have not understood our responsibility to family. Instead, we have run on. Well, what we've done is, instead of being obedient, we have sought the root of sacrifice. Also, ask yourself the question, have I given attention to my emotional and spiritual needs? We are emotional people. We are spiritual people. And we need to give attention to that. I mean, give attention to your physical needs. If you're tired, then guess what? Go to sleep. If you need a nap, take a nap. If this is not a good day, then don't get out of bed and don't ruin somebody else's day because you got out. In other words, deal with your own. Understand the equilibrium in your own spirit and own self. And then let me also say, lastly, and that is this. Have I harbored unconfessed sin or unforgiven hurts? Too much of ministry today, people in leadership hang their hurts out like a baggage. We spread it around to other people. You need to do an audit and check yourself. Have I slowed it down? Are there feelings and unheard feelings that I have not been dealing with? Are there hurts I haven't gotten healing with? Deal with them. Come before the Lord. Have them addressed. Don't spew them out from the pulpit, let alone onto the pew. That's a part of a spiritual audit. So it is, if anything, to confess our sins. Yes, to ask for forgiveness. God is faithful and just that he will forgive us of our sins. If I've wronged other people, seek out their forgiveness as best as you can. That's important. And then, yes, determine with the help of the Lord not to go down that street again, not to fall in that pit again. Stay out of that way. And yes, recognize you cannot avoid those pitfalls on your own strength. You need God's strength. Lord, bring it in, pour it in, so that I can do otherwise and do differently. Yes, help me to overcome what my weaknesses are. And then finally, I would share with you, part of that spiritual audit is bring someone into accountability. This is not just about you having a conversation with yourself, but someone else who will, yes, ask the probing questions to help you to get back on track or to stay on track. Yes, a different voice that speaks into your life and brings volume to about who you are and what you should be doing. If you've gotten any sense of what our discussion has been this round, it's really talking about character. Character. About who you really are as a leader. And let me close out this session today. And just a few nuggets about character. Character. Ways to grow as a Christian leader. And I think it's the old-fashioned way when I talk about character development. One is, I think we ought to focus on, how shall I say it? self-development and not self-fulfillment. There's a difference. Self-fulfillment is about how do I generate a feeling good about ministry, what I'm doing. How do I feel fulfilled in what's happening? Self-development is about how is God developing me that in turn I can be used in ministry. There's a difference between the two. It involves motivation. It involves what you see your end goal is. It involves where you put energy at. I would charge you, focus on self-development, where God is developing you and not on self-fulfillment. Secondly, shared recently with some colleagues at ministry, you really ought to grow by association. What do you mean by that, Reverend Lloyd? What I mean by that is that in ministry, you ought to line yourself up with someone who is larger than who you are. Someone who's had more experience than you are. Someone who walks deeper in relationship with God than you are. In other words, put yourself in their sphere. If it means calling them up, saying, let's have coffee. If it means, having lunch with someone, it means that I reach out and spend some time with them. But you want to align yourself with someone larger than who you are that encourages that, in other words, that big word, aspirational. I aspire to. And that needs to be a part of the character development. It's not just because I read a book and says I ought to be this way. It's because I see it modeled by someone else around me and say, yes, that's what I want to be like. Thirdly, it's about a personal creed. In some of my classes, I talk with students about writing their own mission statement. That means reflecting and thinking about ministry, about leadership, about who you are personally, raising questions about it, and then narrowing it down. Mission statement, a creed, is really no more than 2 or 3 lines or sentences that encapsulates everything that you're talking about. And therefore, develop what that is. What's your personal creed in ministry? And then when we do ministry, that creed keeps us focused, online, and in place. So I encourage you today, if you haven't done that, figure that out, write it down. And mind you, it's not in stone. It is something that you go to and remind yourself of. But as you journey in ministry, in leadership, and the season moves along, you may come back to it and say, I need to alter this. And that's okay, because God is doing a new thing in you. And his new thing in you also alters your perspective. Fourthly, can't say it enough, build the habit of continual learning. Make it a habit. None of us have arrived in ministry. None of us are where we think we ought to be. I hope not. We talked about that spiritual diet. And some of us, the only thing we know about is one particular area, and we have nothing about all the other areas, and yet we are multifaceted individuals with so many things coming at us and coming out of us. So I would really charge you, get into this mode of continual learning. Sometimes we say in higher education, lifelong learning. Yes, there is always something else that God wants to teach me. I have not arrived. Go for it. Start it out with this idea that I'm always constantly learning. And that learning comes not just for what's written, what some book, some class I took, one seminar I took, but it also comes from people who interface in our life. Also, I have found in ministry that I really ought to guide my learning through some themes. Each year, there's a theme for ministry. I have a theme, and what happens is that allows everything to get focused around that theme. We have so much coming at us, so much information coming to us. We can't contain it all. So that means focus in on a theme, on a particular year, particular month, and allow that theme to guide your learning, guide your study. I use it for ministry. And that means when we have a theme for a year, all of the ministries of the church, as they work on Women's Day, Men's Day, on retreats or what have you, it needs to line up with what the church theme is for that year. It guides us in our learning, in our experience of worship, in our experience of doing ministry. And lastly, I would share with you today, and that is this. We ought to move from duty to delight. We start off in ministry. This must be done. This is the duty I have. This is the responsibility I have. And yes, we may start off fulfilling and putting a checklist on everything as we go. But somewhere in the course of doing ministry, we ought to move from this sense of duty to a sense of delight. Remember earlier I said, it's about joy. It's about joy. It's about delight. It's about saying, I rejoice in the fact that God is using me in ministry. It's good to be talking with you today in this here volume. Let me share a couple resources I've found along the way that may help you. One is a book called Saying Yes to Grace by Kirk Jones, great colleague of mine in ministry, and he's written this wonderful book. Another one is called Soul Care by Rob Reisner. I recommend that to you. Taking care of the soul, we as individuals in ministry. Another one by Jeff Igor, and it's called The Character of Leadership. The Character of Leadership. And then there's that great little book by Jeff Calger. It's called Leadership's Secrets of St. Paul. Leadership Secrets of St. Paul. I recommend that to you. And lastly, as a resource, the book titled The Leadership Baton by Richard Foreman. I recommend these resources to help you as you wrestle with who you are, who have you been, and who are you becoming.